Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Sheikhs Podcast. We're live in Abu Dhabi here in blockchain world. I'm your co-host Anas Bird. I'm here with my good man, Big D, Danosh. How's it going, my man?
How you doing, blockchain people? Hope you enjoyed the last few days. It's been amazing. Thank you for coming and joining us in this session with our amazing guest, Vesa Kivinen. So Vesa is one of the OGs in the crypto space and also in the NFT and crypto art space. So actually he started with this whole NFT journey long way back before NFTs became famous. And we would love to share his story with you guys, but also talk a little bit generally about blockchain and different types of technologies and how we see them evolving.
So on the Crypto Sheikhs podcast, we like to simplify crypto. We like to keep it, we discuss a lot of topics around NFTs, crypto, blockchain, all of them. And we actually had Vesa, very thankfully, on our podcast very recently, Chez Moi at my house. We actually ended up jamming together on the guitar together. It was pretty cool.
It was so fun.
So just before actually we came here, Vesa and I were having something to eat, and we ended up having a really interesting discussion around Bitcoin. We were seated next to, I think, Adam, who was talking about the quantum computing aspects of how Bitcoin could be threatened by quantum computing in the future, because Bitcoin's built on proof of work, and that poses sort of certain risks to it. We were just talking a little bit more about, whether quantum computing could protect Bitcoin in the future. Maybe we could just have a little discussion there about, your thoughts about, firstly, Bitcoin. You've told this to me before. It's an important part of taking power back for ourselves, creating a new financial system, right? Because it's decentralized. The philosophy around Bitcoin is very important. So we don't want to lose that in a future. Maybe we could, have a little discussion about that and your views on Bitcoin generally.
Yeah, because I became a money activist at around 2006 when I realized how the monetary system, the legacy finance system works. And I ended up producing a documentary film in the Finnish language with Finnish experts about the whole thing. And we worked on it for a full year. And then we released it out for the public for free. So we kind of had that decentralization mindset already back then. But it was a long time before that. After that, I was in a screwed up position because I was an artist and an entrepreneur and a money activist, and you kind of get all of those things bundled up, and it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Explosive combination.
Yeah, it's not the greatest. So when I finally understood, because human beings have a tendency to corrupt the systems that we're involved in, and the fiat system, you could see, is in a little bit of a death spiral that is influencing just about everything else around. And then all of a sudden comes along Bitcoin, and then this decentralized system that is, for the first time in the world, we have something like this in the history of humanity, and it's a little difficult to understand to begin with, but then there's no king, there's no business, there's nothing to take down. It's just a bunch of computers maintaining a value ledger all across the world, and it's so powerful. And like what we were talking is that, okay, so with Ethereum, it's completely different, and quantum computing doesn't affect proof of stake, like you were saying.
Yeah,
correct.
So which kind of corruption do you think is going to be, or where do you place your money on, essentially? Because if you have Bitcoin and you can't really tamper with the system. So you can't do the old corruption thing that way, but it might have other threats to it. But then even if you're currently burning a lot of Ethereum, and the supply is getting scarcer and scarcer, you can still generate more. So even if it's a generation or 2 generations from now, is the temptation of what we've had with all of our systems before, where people start to corrupt the system and inflate the value of it, will Ethereum be able to be run by people who won't do that? So it's you're always picking in between like two things that are.
Let's take a step back. Let's explain because we like to make things easy for you guys to understand. So Bitcoin, as a technology, as a blockchain, the theory is if you control more than 51% of the Bitcoin mining network, you can essentially control and manipulate transactions. And that's a threat. But in order to do that, you need to have massive amounts of computing power. Now, with technology, we see that new computers.
IBM in particular, building sort of the quantum computers.
What's the name of the Watson?
Yeah, the Watson.
The Watson. So with these new computers, you could potentially take control of the Bitcoin network and manipulate it, and that's a threat. So just wanted to clarify that point to the audience so that they know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And also, because it's a little bit out of our wheelhouse actually to know whether, but it was an interesting question. If quantum computing is a threat to the Bitcoin system, can it also be an assistance for it? Because if it can be pro-Bitcoin with quantum computing, maybe it can help it make even more secure. So if I was like a massive Bitcoin whale with 5,000 Bitcoin or whatever, I'd be looking at that quite hard at the moment to see if that network can be protected by it as well as it.
But all of this sort of centered on a key question we were discussing, which was in 10 years or so, what would one Bitcoin be worth, right? And the value of Bitcoin, he was asking me, so, what could I trade my Bitcoin for in the future, right? If it's worth, if it becomes $1 million per Bitcoin, then obviously that's incredible, right? But if there is a threat to the network and a threat to the systems in some way, then perhaps that isn't going to be, who knows, right?
But on the same coin, I mean, if you talk about, let's say I have a quantum computer, so I want to manipulate the system to make a short-term profit. But if I do that, the Bitcoin is going to go under question. People are going to pull their money out of Bitcoin. They're not going to trust it as a decentralized currency anymore, and that would, obviously drive down the prices significantly. So if I was in a position to manipulate it, I probably wouldn't. But even, let's say there would be some rogue players out there, and they would want to take control for the short-term gains. Now, what do you think would be the scenario in that case? Do you think there would be a war of quantum computers?
Yeah, I guess human beings are really good at that. We're good at making wars on stuff. So I guess that's the natural, the competitive edge, right? I mean, that's just the natural evolution of things. So I'm sure that's going to be a part of the equation.
Let's take the discussion in a different direction now. Let's go towards NFTs. A huge part of this year has been incredible for this space. And I remember having the discussion with you on the podcast how, crypto art, NFTs, for the longest period of time, we didn't have this level of recognition, right? Many of the crypto projects that came out in the NFT or art projects that came out in 2017, they really didn't have significant value for 3 years or so until 2021, when people started hearing about them, and people started saying, wow, this is actually an industry that could really, really change things. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience going through the highs and lows of what it's like to be an NFT artist and an artist generally in the crypto space.
And even to the degree that it's standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, for example, last time that I was doing an art show in Miami, I was hanging out with a guy called Lawrence Gartell, and they call him the digital titan. So he was already, I think he taught Andy Warhol how to use a Macintosh computer, and he was doing already, like in the late 70s or early 80s, he was doing on a Mac, he was doing different kinds of digital artworks. So we've had digital creativity ever since the dawn of computers, but because we haven't had blockchain or NFT technology, no one's really cared about it because you couldn't energize and monetize it in a way. So it's like, even though so I came in halfway through 2017 to crypto art and NFTs just immediately. It was a natural evolution to everything that I was doing. But realizing that there's decades and decades of this sort of creativity that's come before, and a lot of people who've gone unacknowledged because simply the galleries couldn't take them in because they couldn't monetize their work. So now it does feel like the NFTs are the new buzzword, and it's like almost happened overnight or whatever. But there's actually decades and decades of effort for us to get to this point.
So it feels right now that the whole world is trying to create NFTs.
Everybody's
it feels
coming
like
up with a
everyone
drop.
wants to create an NFT project. What do you have to say to the traditional artist or someone that wants to get into the space? What things should they be aware of?
Well, at the very beginning, and the sort of humble beginnings of NFTs, I wouldn't say that the quality was spectacular with a lot of different kinds of things. And the collectors were basically crypto bros. So they started collecting things that they kind of saw were cute or cool or something like that, but it was really about the game dynamics. Are there like 1,000 of these? What kind of community can we build around them? And this, and that's not really something that is maybe so appealing to a lot of contemporary or fine art people.
Fine art.
So it's because it's a very different kind of mentality, and you really need to learn what's inside of the frame. What is the frame saying, or what the artist's career, or what they've achieved, and all these kind of things are really, in the early days and even up until now in the world of NFTs, it's not even relevant. It's like, okay, we don't care what you've done before. We don't care about your career. We don't care about any of this stuff. We just want to know how quickly we can flip them. And this, rightfully so, gives many like fine artists, they're going like, well then, I'm not sure if I'm able to enter this because
space.
my value is just bleeding out all the way through this. But now it's starting to merge that the galleries and the Christie's and the Sotheby's and the expertise is coming in. So maybe the amalgam of the expertise of the legacy art world and then this new creative zone are coming together. And it just takes time. I mean, NFTs haven't even had their first bear market yet. And we don't even know what that's going to look like, even if we're going to have one. But some sort of value correction is going to have to come in because a lot of the foundations haven't been put very solidly there. So
we should comment on this in one sense. So for this audience's sake, so Danosh and I had a really deep dive into NFTs earlier in the main exhibition hall. We covered a lot of issues on the distinction between fine art and collectibles, which is where we've seen the huge influx of kind of money and attention coming into. So the crypto punks, which were launched for free in 2017, are now worth, at one point they had a floor price of 100 ETH, making them one of the most valuable projects. Then we had the Bored Ape Yacht Club come out early in April this year, and now every celebrity seems to own one. It's become like a private members club for this crypto elite. And what's happened there is after these successful launches, what it looks like is happening is the NFT space is looking a bit like some kind of stock market where different people, artists, collaborate with projects and other types of creators, smart contract engineers, and they IPO themselves into the metaverse by launching or dropping their projects. These then lead to huge capital raises. So for example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, they made, I think, $2 million on their initial mint in April and have since made in excess of $55 million on their royalties from the excess amount of people buying them. So it's interesting now that the NFT world is in a way a means for the artist to become an entrepreneur, to launch a project without the traditional need of capital markets, the stock market, right? And I think this is that's creating some initial divisions between the fine artists and the collectibles, because the NFT space is now being split up in this way. And I think you have some interesting views on all this.
Yeah, because it's just that the fine art world is as gamified as the collectible space, but we just haven't had a lot of expertise yet on what the sort of conditions are to gamify the fine art realm. And once those start to come together a little bit more, and just like because the whole thing of people are saying, okay, so I aped into this and whatever. So from my perspective of what I've dedicated my life to doing, and what I take some pride in after having achieved it, and some people have admitted it as much, that I wanted to create something that didn't exist before I started making it. And it was a painstaking process to get to that whole thing, like a 20-year professional career. And then all of a sudden, this thing, because I've generated about 350 high-resolution museum-grade digital originals over the last 14 years.
Brilliant.
So now if you look at it from the point of view that I'm now 43, I have maybe 40, 50 years left if I'm lucky. And essentially then, if I'm producing work at this rate, I will have these unique things, a lot less of them that are CryptoPunks. But we don't sort of think of that, the artists and their output, and depending on how they produce things, as a closed loop, like you would look at a Bored Ape Yacht Club type of thing. But it's really about so the collectible space is about these different kinds of traits and whatever it is, but it's a copy of a copy of a copy and the next ape thing and the whatever. So from my perspective as a fine artist, it's the opposite of the mentality. I'm looking for the exceptional, the different, the something that comes with a unique voice all of a sudden, and it's about having the ability to recognize that unique voice and then figuring out the gamification on the fine art terms for that. And I think once that expertise really comes in, now people think that it's the other way around. It feels like the collectibles are sort of taking off and they're doing that. But once some of these things and a little bit the sort of wash trading aspects and those things in NFTs are kind of mitigated a little bit.
And the bear market hits as well.
There are already billionaires who are waiting to get into the fine art realm, but there are certain things that they don't yet trust so that they could actually trust their money with it. But once those things are resolved, I think we haven't seen nothing yet of what the fine art realm of this can do. And this is what I'm actively building towards.
Brilliant.
So you mentioned Christie's and Sotheby's, which are these fine art gallery houses, and we're seeing that they're moving into the NFT space more and more. They're doing auctions on NFTs. But what blockchain really does, it removes centralization. It removes the middlemen. That's what we see with banking. That's what we see with the music industry, etc. So how do you see their role playing out in the future? Do you think they will become completely irrelevant in the NFT space? Or do you think that they can fulfill certain services or act as a certain mediator in the NFT space?
I would love to know the sort of internal discussions of what are going on inside of those companies at the moment. I wouldn't. It's hard to predict, but it's a little bit like what it felt like to me. Some of the first moves of Christie's and Sotheby's when they came in, it was a little bit like when they did the collectible space. It was kind of like you have the finest restaurant in the world, and let's say it's been running for a long, long time, and you've over a century or something started to trust that whole thing, that this is the best thing that it could ever be. But then just because Paris Hilton is curating a McDonald's hamburger to be the next thing that they kind of launch like this and put them up on a pedestal, that's a little bit like how it felt to me to begin with. So it was like, okay, this is kind of the upside down of things. But then again, it's that Christie's and Sotheby's they're about real estate. They're about different things altogether. So it's a new venture for them, and I'm sure it's a learning curve for them as well. But I don't know. I'm now not so sure where I go to find the cutting edge of contemporary or fine art, where I will trust that those people have been curated to be the very cutting edge of something. I don't know what that institution is anymore, because it's the same sort of fiat culture has taken over so many things, from our media, from our education, to all these institutions and trusted names like the New York Times. They seem to be in a little bit of a spiral, not necessarily going upward. So can Christie's and Sotheby's, can they sort of maintain that segment, that they remain truthful to the name that built them?
Yeah.
That's maybe the question.
One thing I want to comment on, which is kind of a new thing that I've observed, because I used to buy traditional art. My family are big buyers in that traditional art space. And in the old world, how the art world used to work, right, was we didn't have Twitter, Discord, Instagram back then, right? And the way for an artist to really get exposure, or for an artist to make it in any sense, was to find a patron of some sort. Even Michelangelo back in the day, he had a patron. Different types of famous artists throughout history had patrons who paid for them to do so that they could be brilliant, right? And that's because they didn't have a way to build a community around who they were, right? And so the galleries, these Christie's, etc., they had the right connections, right? All the nice, wealthy people. I used to work at a law firm, and several of the partners at my law firm used to, get together to attend auctions and all that kind of thing. It was a very, very snobby sort of affair. Now, however, it's a bit different, because the places where the money is located for NFTs isn't necessarily Christie's or any of these traditional gallery houses. It's actually on Twitter or Discord, because a substantial amount of wealth has been transferred in this bull run to a large number of crypto hodlers who are young people. You know, they're 25, they're 30, they don't really know two things about a Picasso or anything. I would even care. That's not really their realm of expertise. You know, so, you know, I know several people like this, and they've taken their money and they've aped it into NFTs because they see that as what they like, right? And I guess they've taken their mentality of trading crypto and maybe taken that into the NFT space, and that's why perhaps the collectible space has boomed incredibly. But I also want to touch on another point, which is gamification, something I think relevant to you. So Axie Infinity, one of the top projects of this year, gaming NFT platform. It's up 202,000% on the year, which is an unbelievable amount. Salute to anyone who bought Axie Infinity. You guys are doing very well. But very interestingly, I think this gaming is really where we're seeing a lot of future growth. And I wonder, as a fine artist, and especially one that's also looking into the gaming space, maybe that could be the avenue where fine artists find some way to bring gamification and fine art and around, and also community building, because communities are also central to gaming, right? If we think back to Xbox Live, we think back to Counter-Strike, these all were communities as well. The Twitter space now is all a community, so these Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, they've got a community. I think it's key in some way for the fine artists now, they don't need these galleries. If they can build a community themselves, and they can integrate with gaming, and they can integrate with other types of utilities, they can sell directly to their buyers, right? Curious to hear your views on this general view.
Because it's interesting that you brought up Michelangelo, because I mean the church was a large patron of his, and essentially it was because the church was building community that they made him or commissioned him to do all of these artworks, because they realized that there was a lot of power behind the art. And then of course once they have their community and butts on seats, then the sort of
the money comes.
The money comes also from the community back end. So it's not that much has changed.
Nothing has changed, actually.
So
it's just the medium.
So in that sense, but what I think is, you know, the culture at large and the interoperability that I find fascinating. I had this thought the other day. It's like, because I come from Finland, like it was said, the Nokia was a huge pride for us, and then they sort of didn't innovate with Apple to the actual interface of it, and kind of got left behind because they were sort of logistics experts. But I remember having this sort of national pride moment of when there was a cool Nokia phone in a Transformers movie or something like that. So I was kind of wondering that, what if I started doing collaborations again with actresses or actors or something like that, turning them into NFTs, and then so you have product placement of NFTs, let's say in a cool movie, and then that becomes a gamified skin in the game of that movie or things like that, and all of a sudden the television series, the movies, the games, and all of a sudden the culture at large on the internet becomes interconnected in this kind of way. It starts to tap into various different kinds of communities with the same kind of product. And what a legendary thing it is that if you get the NFT that is like only 1,000 people have it from a certain movie or something like that, and then you have that thing and you're gaming with it in the game space that isn't even about that game itself. If you can take that asset and take it into other platforms. And that was a kind of like moment just going like, man, this is going to get interesting.
Absolutely.
So you built something around the Tesla. So this is a very interesting project. You NFT'd an actual car. And we've seen the car here at the Blockchain World. It looks super cool. There's another car next to it as well. I think is it a Pontiac?
It's a Saturn Red Skyline.
Saturn
it's a very
Red.
rare, I think a GM-based car that evolved from there, and there's not many of them around, and they've been discontinued and all that kind of stuff, because the project patron, Dr. Marwan Al-Zaroni, he's a big car guy, so
It certainly looks rare.
So I had no idea what it was when I saw it. I was like, what is this? Okay. So going back a little bit, about a year ago, I came to Dubai for the first time. And I think in 2014, I had made this mock-up picture of a Tesla because I loved Elon Musk and the things that he was doing, and I thought it was super inspiring. And we sort of, I wrapped it in art that I'd done, and along the years, every now and then, I'd show this picture to many people. And among the many conversations that we had with Dr. Marwan, it was just one that I showed him this picture. And then a couple of months later, he was like, Vesa, do you want to hop on a Zoom call? I'm like, yes, of course. And he goes like, well, yeah, I've bought 17 cars now.
Wow.
We're going to be making them into NFTs, and now a little bit after, it's evolved into a project that has 55 cars.
Wow.
Wow.
But
Congrats.
but the foundation of the project, what I thought was really interesting about the whole thing is that even if you have $1 million Lamborghini, as soon as you drive it out the shop, you've gone literally 10 minutes out of the store, it's worth 700,000.
The depreciation on vehicles is unbelievable.
It's
yes,
just
exactly.
insane. So it's really just a luxury use good, but it's, like you said, depreciable.
It becomes a liability. It's no
should-
longer an
right, you should-
asset.
You should never turn on a car for the first time.
And especially like you buy a Lamborghini with a Bitcoin, I think it's just insanity.
You're losing money. You're throwing money away.
I would
mean,
never do that.
So
I
yeah,
would
it's
never do
complete. So how do you reverse the car value pyramid? And I started thinking about, okay, so you take a unique digital art piece, a one of one, you wrap that into the car, but the wrap on the car actually is just a pointer to the digital artwork that you own. So you stack value. With this NFT, you get the physical car, you get the one-of-one artwork, but then also a virtual reality asset.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
So we made it into a 3D asset that we're going to develop into a game. And this is where I'm aping in from the Bored Apes, is that I thought, what if we make it into a club? What if only those who've bought the stacked NFT asset can play this game? And maybe you can then, if you have a Tesla, someone has a Lamborghini, you might not be able to compete because of all the values and things like that, so you might have to soup it up, and it becomes a continuous thing. But then it's also a hang. So, but because one of the companies that I also am a part of is Shisha Finance with Saeed Al-Darmati.
We're actually investors in that as well.
Yeah, we're actually having Saeed on the podcast on Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. He's so amazing. So, but essentially I was thinking that also if in this stack of value, there could be DeFi coins that are staked for, let's say, 5 years.
Very interesting.
5 years is like a super long time in crypto. So if it's staked there, so it means that you're more incentivized to hodl that asset for a while. Because now, from my perspective, a fine art perspective, the quick fix, quick flip mentality of NFTs are really a problem for me. Because my value is sort of sustained increased over time, and I kind of need collectors like that. So if you're incentivized to hold a car, like if you sell it, the whole stacked asset, you're also going to have to let go of the coins. You can only collect the coins if you've been hodling the asset for 5 years. And that's where DeFi and NFTs are starting to become a very interesting sort of amalgam. And I'd love to play more with that, what that actually means.
Amazing. So where do you see, the next? Can you give something to the audience about what you're planning next? I mean, what's your next big thing that you're gonna do, or is that a secret?
It's probably smarter not to.
I think what he's doing right now is substantially significant, because I like this idea. You're taking a liability and you're converting it into an asset. You're also then making that asset usable in sort of a game of some sort, right? And then that also becomes something that I was just thinking this into my head. Like so earlier today we were talking about in a future enabled by DeFi, a lot of NFT assets can be used to obtain loans, right? And there's some protocols already doing this, right? If you take your Bored Ape Yacht Club, you take your punk, you bring it to a protocol. Let's say I'm a lender, right? If he had a punk and he came to me and said, Anas, I need, $20,000. Here's my punk as collateral. I'd be very happy to loan him $20,000 in the back of a punk, and if he doesn't pay it back, I take the punk. Interestingly, cars haven't been able to be used as collateral because they're a liability and they lose value.
Yeah.
But here, very interestingly, perhaps the car could then become an asset that could be used as collateral because it's become an NFT, right? And that's really, really quite interesting.
Yeah,
I think.
it brings value into assets that previously maybe wouldn't have had the same values, that would have lost value. So that's quite interesting.
Very, very cool.
Like,
It's a big innovation.
Last time that I was here, I was talking to this one sheikh, and he basically has this $1 million sword, and he has rubies from the same manufacturer who did the Queen Elizabeth's crown or whatever.
Wow.
And it's got a 350-year royal provenance, this sword. It's been backed up by, I think Christie's in London, and checked out all the different kinds of ways. And he just is like, so how can I make this into an NFT? I'm like, okay, interesting question. So it would probably be that you scan the 3D sword, and then you go through the actual story of the sword, of what it's been through over the last 350 years. Then you maybe turn that into an animated story or something, and then you attach that into the NFT.
But what if that sword would actually become a sword that you can use in a game? As games develop and as we're using more NFTs.
As Generation Z comes into play, I don't think we appreciate the key monster that is Generation Z. We still live in a world of boomers, no offense to the boomers in the room, but their worldview is currently limiting the potential of this world, right? Because they're imposing a structure that limits what Generation Z or the millennials would want for this world, because they are the gatekeepers right now. But as these gatekeepers begin to disintegrate, what's going to happen is Generation Z are going to take their views forward. And so I have my younger brother, and he's 19. He's grown up as Generation Z, and he's grown up with the iPad. He's grown up playing Xbox. His entire framework and culture is so incredibly different from ours, right? Because he grew up with that. We grew up playing maybe football or whatever it is.
I played Counter-Strike, but that's as close I get to gaming.
I grew up playing the guitar and music and things like that. People are playing different kinds of music now, and digital music, electronica, things like that. So they're going to come with a completely novel way of how they want to see this world evolve, right? And so we got to think about that. So assets, like they might look at a sword that's worth, millions because it's been, part of society for ages, but not see much value in it because it's just a piece of rock, that you've attached to other pieces of metal. I don't care about that.
But imagine having that sword as an NFT in a game.
That is.
Then it becomes relevant.
You would be the coolest kid in that game, running around with a sword that has been around for thousands of years.
And here's where maybe some of the boomer generation would go like, well, what kid could afford like $1 million sword that becomes whatever? So one of the real first pleasures that I had is there was a conference called World CryptoCon that I was a part of in 2018 and 2019. And those guys were incredible. But one of the co-founders was a 19-year-old kid. He'd gotten his Bitcoin through gaming. And we're talking about a substantial amount of Bitcoin.
Wow.
And this kid was 19. He's a multi-millionaire, but he couldn't afford to go to his own. He's not old enough to go to his own after party.
Of course.
So there are.
There are definitely people who have these.
He could throw down on a sword like that.
I think this bull run has minted loads of multimillionaires. A friend of mine who's an artist, photographer, based in England. He's 25. He got into NFTs with his art early this year. He invested $2,000. At the end of this year right now, he's now sitting on close to $1 million in profit.
Yeah,
right?
It's insane.
Incredible amount of wealth creation there. He's now built a huge name for himself. He has a community, and he's selling direct to consumer.
And he's not a struggling artist.
He's not a struggling artist anymore, right? And he's creating new projects. His source, he's building a company now. He's able to build a company around his growth and what he's built, his photography. That's beautiful.
It's amazing.
Incredible. So I don't think, I think the more people sort of dismiss the crypto community, the more they're missing out on a lot of untapped wealth that could move into a lot of different industries, right? And that's very important. But I want to go back to a key point that you mentioned, which I was thinking a lot about. You said something about how you're not a big fan of art flipping too much. And what's curious in my experience, so Danosh and I, we run ArtsDAO. We're a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. We're kind of like, we invest in NFT projects, but we also build and accelerate NFT artists into the metaverse. You can give us a follow on ArtsDAO. It's just at ArtsDAO on Instagram and Twitter. But what's interesting is whenever we look at a project that we want to buy in, the more flips it has, that actually gives it a lot more value because that shows that piece of art is high in demand. So whenever I would jump into an auction, which I've done a couple, I would look for multiple buys into that or multiple people trying to bid on that given, so it might be on foundation or whatever. That gives it value. That's the first thing. The second thing as well is flipping is actually essential to the artist because of royalties. So going back to the Bored Ape Yacht Club, they only raised 2 million at the mint, but they raised 55 plus million on the flips through royalties. So it's not actually the mints that are essential to projects and NFT art right now, it's the flips. And that's why I think I'm just curious, what are your thoughts around that kind of economic dynamic which affects the NFT space?
Okay, so I'll have to go back a little bit in order to, and just because when I was in my early 20s, I came across this guy called Ken Wilber. He's the father of integral theory, and essentially, like, he came across this map of the internal world, external world, the individual, the groups, the development from archaic all the way to enlightened masters and sort of the industrial revolutions. It's the map of humanity, essentially, and it was like, it was super, super difficult to try and get what this guy was talking about because there was so much terminology that I didn't understand. I knew that there was a lot of value what this guy was saying, but I just didn't have the points of reference, but I kept on cracking through. But in simplistic ways, and why I call myself an integral artist, is that it's you take multiple points of view, multiple points of value, and then you stack them together and they become a comprehensive whole. And his sort of theories are on the level of the Clintons and the kind of matrix directors and whatever, and integral priests and those kind of people. When they go to talk about the spearhead of philosophy and sort of innovation and things like that, that's where they go to, the Integral Institute in Boulder, Colorado. Now, in 2014, I had my second show with them, and a professor of philosophy of art called Michael Swartz, he said after my Bollywood collaboration project that my works are amongst the most integrally advanced in the history of Western abstraction. Not a small claim, but backed up by the works themselves.
Well, that's a big claim.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
but it's a very well-backed claim as well, because we've seen Vesa's art. I mean, and especially that piece of art. It's as I said before, it's my favorite piece of NFT art.
Very cool. So, but what that really means is that so he put me essentially in the same club as the Picassos and the Rothkos and the Dalis and whatever, and that's about a 5 million floor. And that's the old world. So now, if I just take 350 artworks, and I'm charging, by the way, now at around 50,000 to 100,000 of an artwork, but it has a potential, even on old world terms, if you look at the actual substance of what I've built, to go to a 5 million floor. But with crypto, how high can that go to? So even if it's a 5 million floor, that's still about $1.75 billion worth of value generated once the community energizes to be a part of it. So now, coming back to your question, is like, so what am I don't mind the flipping culture. Like the trading and energizing a community and being a part of something like that, that's incredible. But what I really need at this point is those people who really understand what I've built. Because I've been building it for so long already, and with the mentality of just going, how quickly can this go and flip to another, you entirely miss the thing of what I actually built and why I built it. And that's the point of contention that I've had with the whole NFT thing from the get-go.
This is why it's acting like a stock market.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's become like a stock market for NFTs, especially collectibles. I mean, it's very different from the fine art.
People aren't buying the collections necessarily to appreciate the art. They're buying it just as an investment to flip it upwards.
Or to join a community. The community aspect is still very strong in the collectible space.
Yeah, and I kind of, because I joined for Bitcoin to begin with. I joined because I understood what Bitcoin was and its importance to society, and there wasn't much art having been made at that point in 2017 about it and what it was doing and why it was important. So I thought, if I come and contribute a slice of life and art into this whole thing and maybe make it more approachable, like what you guys are doing, it's like make it approachable, make it simple, make it relevant, make it something that people get so it becomes a larger community. And that's what I thought, I can do this with art. I can make small videos about the artworks and what they have on the inside of them, but it was really about discovering value.
So, just a quick question. If we would do an art piece together, what would that be?
I think
if we would do a collaboration, the Crypto Sheikhs and Vesa Kivinen.
I'd love to. I think we're going to have to go for a cup of tea or coffee after this and kind of start
Let's do that.
cracking down.
Let's do that.
So,
all right.
I think we can begin to wrap this up. I mean, it's been a very, very interesting discussion. I think we've talked about a lot of things. I like the discussion that we started from the top, on Bitcoin and its place and how it's kind of brought this whole community together. And now going deeper into the developments of the NFT space across the fine art, the collectibles. I mean, it's a very, very bullish time to be in the space. Recently, Artifact was acquired by Nike, which is incredibly huge for the industry. Adidas, they're dropping NFTs today
with the
in collaboration with the Bored Ape Yacht Club. The Punks, they were bought by Vesa. So these institutions are aping in right now, and I like what you said though. They're missing out on the fine art space, which has a lot more potential to sort of offer there as well. So very curious to see once these institutions come in. And also, obviously, like you said, all these sort of billionaires, high net worth individuals who have still yet to come into the market because of whatever risks they're looking into, that's going to completely transform the space as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for listening in. It was a pleasure to have you here, Vesa.
Thank you, Vesa.
Always good with you guys, every time. You make every room better where you go.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're in the desert right now, so
One of the driest rooms we've been in.
hope it wasn't too hot for you.
It was okay.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys, for listening.
Thank you all.
Tune in on the Crypto Sheikhs podcast.
Check out the Crypto Sheikhs podcast on Instagram, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcasts.